And I'm just gonna.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the special meeting, or public information session concerning Wolf Creek Park. I'd like to welcome you all to the commission chambers. Allison, you have anything you'd like to say about this before we get started?
Well, I'll just say since Jenna Belcher is attending Zoom because of the weather, she's attending from Beckley, but Andy is here from NRGRDA. As you guys probably know, the commission purchased the Wolf Creek Park property from its debtors and transferred it with some conditions and an MOU in place to the NRGRDA so it can seek developers for it. And the purpose of this session today is for the NRGRDA to update the public on the status of marketing the property and that sort of thing. And so they didn't plan to take any questions. It was more a FYI session, but hopefully it'll be informative and I'm sure that Andy would be happy to take your questions back and then we can get some answers to those at a later time. But is Jenna on board now? Is she online? I don't know. Let me check. I have her cell phone.
Andy, are you
No,
can
that's
control
not her.
PowerPoint through the system?
I've got it over here, but I can.
Wilbur has it.
Okay.
And definitely say the advanced slides. There's nothing.
I'm
You
gonna
may
just
want to grab the microphone
text her
and take it down to the table
on.
so people can hear you through the internet. I take the stand and all.
I'll take standing off.
Anybody doesn't have to try to hold it.
Thank you. Well, he's not on here yet. Well, I'll just start because we met with her last week and got kind of an update, unless you want to do it, Andy. I mean, either way. Have some
So
notes.
happy to jump in, put together a slideshow and, it's not a little about a good slideshow, but it's informative as, Mr. Brennan just said, we're here to give an update. What's going on? What's been great is that we've had, I can say stakeholders, I think I use the term stakeholders in the slideshow, but we've had folks reaching out saying, what's going on? What's the next step? And that's great. So this is all designed to answer those questions. Where are we in the process? What is the process? Who are we working with? And what opportunities does everybody have to be a part of the process right now, tomorrow, next month, later this year, in between now and what the end goal remains, which is to develop Wolf Creek Park into a mixed use, community driven, community benefiting area for data. So.
Well, and part of the provision in the MOU, and I don't have it in front of me, what was that we get to sign off on what is going to happen there. And I know there's a big priority for a lot of people that some of the land that is not developable be kept in a conservation capacity, and I think we're on board with that. Our priority as far as Wolf Creek Park is concerned, we really want to try to address our critical housing shortage. And one of the things that we've asked NRGRDA to look into and to advise us on is if there are incentives that we as a commission can offer through tax rebates or maybe even leaving the TIF in place for a little bit, or just different things to incent, because we know, and I know Will can tell you because he was on the URA board for so long, but it's almost prohibitively expensive to get infrastructure out there. I mean, it's going to be a major issue. So they're going to have some kind of incentive to come to the table. We've even talked about whether we would, one of the ideas that's been thrown around, we haven't really talked about what anybody wants to do, but whether we would allow them to develop the property and not pay us back for it. I mean, there are a lot of things on the table as possibilities to incentivize a developer to come out and get that thing developed. And we talked about mixed use housing, not just housing like Thousand Oaks and that kind of stuff, but where our seasonal workers can live and that sort of thing. Also, we've talked about maybe smaller businesses. We know it won't support them. Again, Will's an engineer, he can tell you, like, it's just, you know, our ability to, Oak Hill's ability to serve that is probably unreasonable if it were gonna be big industry. It's not an industrial park. It needs to be a place for housing and smaller businesses at best. So, okay, Jenna's on there. Do you want her to chime in, Andy?
That'd be fine. Jenna, welcome. We are just getting started. Allison was giving an introduction, sort of an update on the recent conversations that NRGRDA has had with the commission and setting up the presentation and the conversation for today's meeting. Happy to hand it over to you two for an introduction and anything you want to say here at the start.
Sure. Thank you guys. Sorry about that. I had a call that ran over. I appreciate everybody jumping on for this. We know there's been a lot of questions around Wolf Creek Park, and obviously know that the commission really has prioritized development at Wolf Creek Park and determining the best type for the greater Fayette County community. And so I think we wanted to use this as an opportunity today, as an opportunity to just share where we are with Wolf Creek Park, the sort of alignment of next steps with the Fayette County Commission, and really just provide an overall update so that folks can understand, you know, since the county made an investment in this to ensure that it is, you know, in some way benefiting the greater Fayette County area, we wanted to tell you all where we are with this, and what the next steps will look like and what you can expect. So we're using today to share that information, introduce some of the partners that we're working on with this project, and really just again sort of set that level set with the expectations of what Wolf Creek Park will look like in the future, and figure out how to share that information with the public so that you all feel well informed. So appreciate those that have jumped on today. And Andy, I'll pitch that over to you unless there's any questions from the commission for me.
Jenna, didn't we also mention that there's going to be a site set for people to submit questions?
Yes,
So-
absolutely. That's a
Okay.
good point, John. So we didn't, you know, we've done a lot of work around Wolf Creek Park, as we've consistently shared with the commission. And we really feel confident about the direction that we're heading with this in tandem with the commission. So today isn't necessarily about Q&A or any sort of thoughts on what Wolf Creek Park should be. We feel really confident that there's an alignment of you know, prioritizing housing and prioritizing that sort of live play dynamic at Wolf Creek Park. We're not, you know, I think I heard Allison mention, like, we knew long ago when NRGRDA assessed this in 2019, we knew this would never be an industrial park. We're not prioritizing large job creators in Wolf Creek Park. We really want to focus on providing housing and providing an area that is conducive with the rest of Fayette County and the environment in the national park. And so today is not going to be really an opportunity for, you know, if there are burning questions, sure. But at this point, we are going to have a submission portal for any questions related to Wolf Creek Park, because we really want today to just be about an information gathering session for the public, so we can tell you all where we currently stand with this.
And I'll have more details on that, y'all, in the slideshow. But I think we can jump into the slides. They should kind of guide the conversation, and absolutely towards the end, if any of the info that's in the slides doesn't address anything that y'all hear, any concerns or questions, of course we're here to address that. And I think most importantly, get a mutual understanding that today is the beginning of a process, or you know, this is a day within the ongoing process of the site development planning process. So the next slide we'll jump into one of our key partners that we're working with, the Conservation Fund, and specifically a program that the Conservation Fund, the national organization, is working with us through the activating the natural resources economy. We have with us Miles Kirksey from the Conservation Fund. He's been a key partner in recent months as we have applied for assistance through their Henry program to put toward this planning process for Wolf Creek Park. Miles will be able to give an overview of the ANRA program. Yes, we call it Henry.
Activation. We got
Activation.
for sure. Yeah.
The activation program, and I think can give some examples of other projects that it has been used for to sort of explain more dynamically why this is a good fit for this project.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all for having me this afternoon. Again, Miles Kirksey, Program Associate at the Conservation Fund, on our Activating the Natural Resource Economy platform. That's a long name, so we do use activation for short. I'll go to the next slide and tell you a little bit about this program at the Conservation Fund. Conservation Fund's been around for 40 years in the conservation space. We consider ourselves fairly unique in that we do have a dual mission charter. On one side, that's your traditional land-based conservation and preservation. And on the other side, that's economic development and ensuring that land-based natural resource communities are able to leverage that land for economic opportunities, resiliency and prosperity. So we do balance this dual mission charter of the Conservation Fund, and our activation program is kind of the true connection point between those two dual missions and dual purposes. So our program's fairly new. We've been around 3 years now. West Virginia was one of our first focus regions for this program. That work was predominantly concentrated in and around the area of the Monongahela National Forest. Some of our key partners up there have been Woodlands Development and the Mon Forest Towns Partnership. We supported a lot of trail planning, local capacity building for some of the gateway communities surrounding the mine, and generating economic opportunities off the national forest, off the outdoor recreation economy, and kind of revitalizing some of their downtown main streets in that area. This would be one of our first forays outside of that in West Virginia. But we do think, after knowing the history of Wolf Creek Park and hearing the vision from the NRG RDA team and knowing where the county has moved this project over the years, we feel like it's in strong alignment with our program and some of the connection points that we look to incentivize and move forward throughout our work. So this is just a quick slide about our vision. We do think natural resource-based economic development, so economic development that works in concert with conservation, produces communities that's more inclusive, resilient, and prosperous by doing diversified economic development, building in outdoor rec, forest products, working lands. You're able to create opportunities that produce generational wealth and incentivize quality of life improvements for local residents. That's kind of our theory of change. That's why we deployed this economic development program at the fund, and we're excited to engage in the Wolf Creek project. We'll go one more slide over, talk about some of our work. So how we work, I will name all of our projects are partner-led. The Conservation Fund, I'm out of Raleigh. I work in 3 states across the United States: West Virginia, Georgia, and Washington. But all of our projects are partner-led. We do not come in from the Conservation Fund, my office in Raleigh, and tell a community what to do. We know these projects are already taking place. We look for projects that have alignment with our program and try to support them through a variety of different ways. It looks different everywhere we engage, but this is a list of some of the supports we're able to provide. Big one, technical assistance and flexible funding. That's one area we will look to support Wolf Creek Park here. That being an original investment in this planning process, but also some TA from our team. We'll bring some expertise. My background's in rural economic development. In North Carolina, we've got a landscape architect on staff, and then Ashton Burdine, our state director, came from West Virginia Land Trust, has a big background in conservation in this state. So we look to provide some TA around that, but also we'll be following the lead of the NRG RDA team and the county with full discretion going to those 2 parties on the planning process. This just speaks to some of our other kind of areas we're able to support. I would highlight in our next slide, we'll talk on specific projects that we have engaged on, but Here on the bottom, 3 years, we're still fairly new. But some of the original kind of catalytic capital is what we call it, just a project that needs a little spurt at the beginning at that pre-development planning phase, that could then move forward and draw down some larger funding dollars, larger investment from private philanthropic, federal state investment. Projects we've engaged in so far have drawn down $4.8 million in partner investment. We've got other partner projects that have $5.8 million in applications outstanding. So we feel strongly that the work that we support at that planning pre-development phase has led to some tangible outcomes for the communities we're engaged in. I'll go to the next slide and talk about some of those projects and what this natural resource economy is. This won't look too surprising to anybody here, but we look for projects that tie multiple connection points. We call this our honeycomb. So kind of sectors of the natural resource economy. A big one at the Conservation Fund, we've got a very active working forest program. We're engaged in New Hampshire, Washington around forest products, workforce development. Lot of work in downtown revitalization. Where we see Wolf Creek fitting in and touching, and why we're interested in the project is that connection to housing. Understanding that housing is a ripple effect that touches all of these different areas of economic development. But also the recreation and tourism component. Understand that Wolf Creek has been an outdoor rec asset and does, is leveraged by residents, but also outside visitors, which does have ripple effects for local economic development. You see some of our work in West Virginia, the mines, that's been all trail to town work. We do have a housing project in New Hampshire, an employer assisted housing project where we did some planning pre-development, conservation support in New Hampshire. So we think Wolf Creek fits into some of our projects and expertise here. We're excited to support NRG RDA and undertaking some of this work. So yeah, that's a little bit about our program, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the Conservation Fund's interest in this project.
I think it's important to tell you the Conservation Fund has given the NRG RDA a $110,000 grant of technical assistance to study. And I know that especially those of you who have your businesses out there and who've been on the board, we've studied it to death. I mean, I know we have studied and I've been very impatient about trying to get something moving on Wolf Creek Park. What this is going to do that's different, first of all, the group doing the study that as he explained, the conservation group is allowing NRG RDA the discretion to identify the group they want to do the study. So we're not going to be limited to anybody they usually use, although they did make some recommendations to us about groups that have done these kind of studies in the past. But significantly, they are going to have the benefit of all of the information we already have. So the plans that have been submitted by other developers and stuff, they are going to be able to see what all these other plans have been done at the URA Commission from the early days all the way through. So they can, kind of get a feel for, use the knowledge that other people have. Like we have a recent sewer study, for example, from Oak Hill that their engineer put together and things like that. So we kind of have those things already quantified. But the other component, like I mentioned earlier, that we've asked them to incorporate is recommendations about how to get this done. I don't just want to keep studying it to death, but like, how can we execute and get this area developed? We've got too much invested in it. It's a great location. We need housing. We want to get something done. And so they're going to look at our tax schemes and all of our rules and try to let us know, like, Commission, this is what you can and can't do to facilitate this project. Like we know we could probably waive the purchase price if that were an incentive, but that's given the cost of infrastructure, that's going to be dropping the bucket. So there's just a lot of stuff that we need to know, because right now we're getting no tax revenue off of that that land because it's in a TIF, and until it's developed, nothing's going to come. So if we gave them a break for a few years to get them to develop it, it would, we're still going to be ahead in the long run. So those are just the kind of things, but they have already given us a grant for technical assistance to do this. The thing that made me feel better is that we are going to have a deadline on the study because I don't like to commission these studies and not have information for months and months and months, and by the time we get it, the information's old, you know, and so, they are gonna they have a final date of completion of October 25 for getting stuff back to the conservation fund. I think that's what it is. Am I right about that, Andy? But we're gonna put a shorter deadline, a shorter suspense on the study, so we can start taking other actions in the meantime. Because we share your impatience about this. You know, we've had the land for a long time, and before we didn't have a lot of money or a lot of opportunities. I mean, the URA did its best to keep things afloat, but we want to be aggressive about marketing it and trying to get it developed. And get infrastructure for the businesses that are out there also. Anyway, you guys can jump in anytime, but that's something that I thought it was important to say, that the reason he's here, they contribute a lot of money to help scope this problem. And we appreciate it.
Yeah, Miles, thank you, and I think you did a great job, talking through the role and roles that Conservation Fund is playing as a partner. A big one being, technical assistance funding, to put towards this plan. With that being the case, and that's a nice chunk of change. We're gonna have a lot of expectations and a lot of deliverables coming from this plan. And so as we progress through the slides, a little bit, I think that was the last few miles back to sort of the intro and then to the next. I'll circle back to who's here today. I can see here in the room, as Commissioner Taylor said, we have folks representing property owners within Wolf Creek Park, folks from local organizations who put time, effort, and sweat equity into trail development within the park boundaries. Online, we have a lot of folks tuned in as well, representing some of those organizations. And we may also have some folks who don't have that firsthand acquaintance with the property itself. So I'm gonna go over a few of the quick facts just to make sure everyone is sort of on the same page of what we're talking about. In excess of 900 acres, only about 240 of which are considered developable. As we go through the next few slides in just a minute, I'll help hopefully provide a little clarity of what I mean by about and developable. So both of those you can put in quotations. We do have utilities that have been extended to the site, as far as some of the smaller parcels that have been subdivided out and developed, including the West Virginia DEP building. So 3-phase electric power, gas provided by Mountaineer Gas, water service by West Virginia American Water, and internet service by Frontier. Of course, those do all end, so it's not like all of those utilities are already available throughout the entire acreage of the property. So going to the next slide. In the early 2000s, the county, in conjunction through the Urban Renewal Authority, Region 4 Planning and Development Council, Thrasher Engineering, Wade Douglas, planning firm, and NRGRDA, put together a marketing package for Wolf Creek Park. It may be familiar to some folks, but this is a few of the takeaways from it, including the imagery you see there, a concept of what development in the acreage might look like. In that, it projected what development on site could include: manufacturing sites, single family housing, retirement community, extreme sports training center. There's a lot of input, and we don't want to forget, as was mentioned earlier, we're going to take all of that into consideration. We're not scrapping ideas. We're pulling those into what we intend to be the best plan yet and the most actionable plan yet. But you'll notice that some of the numbers are mentioned there are different from the next slide. In 2016, it was useful to get an appraisal of the property done. With all the information they had then, they looked at what development had occurred, what they called developable acreage was still available. So of that area where the DEP building is, that was originally a 10.4 acre site. 3.4 of those were sold for the construction of that, with 7 acres remaining. If you've been out there in recent years, you know that's the flat area just past the DEP building. It looks ready to go. So, in a manner of speaking, it is. The existing utilities could be extended to those sites. We do have planning documents that break that into parcels, but it hasn't been subdivided, so that can be done in any number of ways. In this map of the site, you can see that the green areas were scoped out as industrial development, while the red areas were scoped out as residential development. With about 132 acres scoped for industrial and about 96 acres for residential. The westernmost, or actually I shouldn't say westernmost, what's furthest left on there of the red areas, that's the area that has been sold and developed for residential areas. So if you're familiar with where houses exist, that is the only area depicted here that actually has been developed for housing. So there are not roads going to those other red areas, but this gives a good picture of what was envisioned based on topography and the general parameters for determining what is developable and what isn't. Generally, those areas that are identified there are going to be the ground, the tops of the ridges that's most easily cleared out, and utilities most easily extended to those areas. Fast forward again to the next slide, and you'll see a similar but different footprint of what Wolf Creek Park could be. This was done for the Fayette County URA in a document that was published in 2020 by Downstream Strategies. Again, similar footprint. You can see the areas that are in blue here are roughly equivalent to the areas that were in red in the last, or were in green in the last. Areas in green here are roughly equivalent to what was in red in the last. And again, it's scoping out about 90 acres for residential. This one only scoping out about 81 acres for what it calls manufacturing. So what the previous called industrial. This one also included areas carved out for commercial and retail, as well as education and conference center. And as we get to some of the existing uses of the property, we can speak to that as well. How the education and conference center relates to some of the current uses at the New River Nature and Birding Center. I mentioned in the last slide that the developable areas have consistently been in the high ground of Wolf Creek Park. Coincidentally, the areas that have been where trails have been built, as we'll see in a later slide, surround that. It's in the areas outside of the high ground, so that they aren't overlapping and they're not conflicting with each other. So if you go to the next slide, as I just mentioned, the New River Nature and Birding Center, while it's not mapped here, some of you may have visited that before. If you visit the parking lot on the left and keep going down, you'll get to a boardwalk. There's been a dedicated group of volunteers active on the property for many years now. They do provide educational programming throughout the year at that site, and it's quite impressive. I think we do have some representation on the Zoom call today. I believe that Rachel was supposed to tune in, but NRGRDA has been coordinating, been in contact with Rachel Davis, who's one of the lead volunteers for the Nature and Birding Center, just to make sure that their programming is not interrupted through this period of planning and future development. Of course, wanting to preserve those benefits provided to the community by the Nature and Birding Center. And in the next slide, there's a quick overview of a recent plan that parts of which have come to fruition, the Fayette County Salt Surface Trails Plan, where they identified 4 areas within Fayette County for salt surface trails to be built. One of which, Wolf Creek Park. I think in the plan, was it a total of about 15 miles, or it's 15 mile? additional, okay, so up to,
Up to 30 total, give or take,
gotcha. So is it at about 15 now?
somewhere in there.
Gotcha. So within this plan, professionally designed, trail routes, approximately 15 miles have been built. If you were to overlay that map, with some of those previous, development maps, you'd see again that the lines of the trails, do not go right through the middle of the, developable areas. They complement the contours of the land and, sort of fill in the space, so to speak, of the land. We've also been in communication with FPC over the last couple of years since we've been involved, and we have drafted an MOU that outlines the ongoing roles that the volunteer trail organization continues to play with the maintenance of the trails, keeping those available for public use, and the identifying the priority to preserve the existing trails with future development
If possible, or at least reroute them in some way.
that's right. We don't want to get rid of trails. We aren't trying to bulldoze over what has been built. And so the language of that MOU is something that we've gone back and forth and tried to get just right. And obviously, this is a living agreement. So what we're going to talk about in just a minute is what the process looks like moving forward, and the fact that all of these organizations and stakeholders are going to be a part of the planning process. We want y'all to take looks at plans, provide feedback to literally overlaying the maps of trails, the maps of the interpretive nature center with the slated development areas and zones for housing, for the manufacturing and light industrial areas of the park. I think the next slide goes towards that. So again, in our GRDA coordination with Fayette County Commission, we're going to continue this planning process. By design, it has built-in opportunities. I think at this point, we've kind of mentioned all of them, but I'll reiterate that the mapping of those assets, whether it's the existing map, some of which were shown here, or any sort of updated information, we want that to be shared in real time. We want the most accurate map of the existing assets in the park, and any hope for future development to be overlaid with the within the site development plan. We want feedback from all interested parties, so I think we can work toward a first draft of the plan, get feedback, and then relay that back to the planning firm. Say, here's what we heard, here's what we think we can get better in the final plan. And then we want to make sure that those updates, that information is available to everybody. So we're going to have a dedicated page on the NRGRDA website, where not only can you see that first draft or the visuals, but there'll be a way for y'all any time of day to put any question. Hey, Andy, I was just thinking about this and forgot to mention it the other day. Obviously, we have a lot of technology available to us every day, so email, phone calls are good too. But we do have we'll have this dedicated webpage for all things Wolf Creek Park planning. And then as far as the timeline goes, again, I think Allison did a great job speaking to that earlier, but I know I've been with the visuals. So we're looking at in the immediate finalizing the RFP with the input and assistance of Conservation Fund, working hand in hand with the County Commission to get that RFP finalized, published out into the world, so that we can move into the next phase, which is the selection of a vendor, selection of a firm, and getting that contract signed, getting the scope of work in their hands, and then looking at spring and summer to be the time when we're sitting down with them on a regular basis, scheduling an opportunity for all of y'all to weigh in and have the different iterations of the plan, different iterations of y'all's input. And then finishing it as soon as we're ready, of course. But aiming towards either August or September of having everybody say, this looks good, we're ready, let's put this out there. What I mean by the bottom part, I kind of broke the marketing of Wolf Creek Park in two sections. Wolf Creek Park is already listed as a site, been listed for a while, decades. We're still doing that. We're ready to talk to potential developers any given day, field those questions, schedule site visits. But with the new site plan in hand later this year, that's where this new phase of marketing of Creek Park begins, and we continue to move forward with that. So that was a lot of words really fast. And so now is the time for any lingering questions, or I'll hand it back to the commission and hand it back to Jenna too, if y'all felt like there's anything from NRGRDA for the commission that we want to add to the presentation information.
I would just like Jenna to speak because she answered this for us. Jenna, could you distinguish this study from all the previous studies? Like explain to everybody what you explained to us about what we're going to gain from this, and then how we're moving forward.
Sure, absolutely. So as you know, Andy has done a phenomenal job sort of outlining the site, the process for the site plan. There's a lot of different facets to this. We know that Wolf Creek Park is a piece of property that is not ready for investment at this point. The costs to invest in develop Wolf Creek Park do not outweigh what a developer, whether that is housing or small office buildings, is going to see a return on. We're obviously aware of that. So what this plan will do is not only, finally really solidify the developable from the non-developable properties. It will also give us a tool to determine what kind of potential subsidies or investments need to come before a developer can be attracted to develop this property. So a couple examples of that we're talking about is, we know that this property has the ability to utilize the Build West Virginia tax credit for housing development. And so how does that factor in when we're recruiting a developer with this site plan? Additionally, do we need to look at a community development district designation and work with the commission to implement that so that it does take the burden of some of the burden of significant investment off of the developer. So that's really what we are looking at this plan to help us figure out, is not only what is developable and what is not, and what does it look like to get from point A to point B within Wolf Creek Park. How can we also look for a firm that can help support essentially a development strategy and a financing strategy for development, so that we can help inform the commission and maybe even the state to help support some of those unique financing tools that are going to be needed to develop Wolf Creek Park. So that's really the difference here for us. And then, also the final thing I will say is we're not looking, we are not tied. The beauty of the Conservation Fund, as Allison has already mentioned, is that they have some recommendations for firms that could potentially help us with this work, because we all know what the end goal should be. So we have not pre-identified a firm. I know a lot of other development projects that are done throughout the state, we may have a potential firm that we want to utilize when we put it out for bid. But at this point, we do not have a firm identified, and we're going to cast a large, wide net, even outside of West Virginia, to help us get this planned. So that's really the difference. I hope that answers the question, Allison.
It does.
I have one more thing, Jenna. I'm curious if today's a good day to mention any updates about the housing study that has been undertaken.
Sure.
That will inform the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a lot of you all know, we launched a regional housing study, I think it was November late November, early December. We have received that draft study back. So we have that in hand now. We have a review committee that is currently reviewing that draft study. But that study will help inform types of development needed in Fayette County and the surrounding area. It is a regional housing study. So that coupled with this site plan and a financing strategy is really going to allow us to better market Wolf Creek Park. Just so you know, because we're in this same room with a lot of folks that are interested, our housing study will be finalized. We'll send back any edits. It will be finalized by March 31st. And we are actually going to have Bowen National come down to an event April 23rd in Beckley. It's a regional future forward event that their chamber is hosting, and they will be sharing the overview of the findings of that housing study. So we'll get that information out. We're going to start marketing that soon. But yeah, the housing study is absolutely going to help determine how we market for development at Wolf Creek Park.
That,
I mean, so that's how she made me feel better about studying it again. I feel like we have some focus and direction this time. And how to transition the concept into reality, not just give us another concept, but how do we, get something and execute? And I think her point about getting it to the point where it's developable, or at least having the programming and funding opportunities in place to market the property, that's been a big issue. I see Will nodding because of the prohibitive expense of installing infrastructure. I mean, whether it's the roads or the wastewater or the water infrastructure, everything is just so expensive. And so the more resources we can bring to the table to help a developer get off the ground, the better. And I think we all have the will to do it, because otherwise it's just this albatross hanging around our necks. But we felt like it was important to invest the money to purchase Wolf Creek Park, because otherwise it would have defaulted to the state. And then we would have had people who've probably never been to Wolf Creek Park making decisions about what to do out there. And we just didn't want to take that risk. And we have needs here, and we wanted to make sure that we could address those needs. So.
Another topic that certainly on my mind as it relates to the different user groups that's already go to Wolf Creek Park and well, hundreds of thousands at Wolf Creek Park, the future users is multimodal transportation. I know Appalachian Drive has become not only a common way to cut off of 19 and get to Fayetteville, but it's what Google Maps and it's a recommended route these days because of traffic on 19. The Fayette Raleigh NPO partnered with us a couple years ago, and we're approaching the end of a USDOT funded Safe Streets and Roads for All safety action plan, which, assuming the funding remains available, would make our region eligible for implementation funding. Why is that important? Because intersections that are known to be dangerous can be targeted within the Fayette Raleigh and DO's area for improvements. So Appalachian Drive to 16 to Wolf Creek, it can be hard to cross that in a car every afternoon, let alone folks who may be wanting to walk, bike, jog there, especially if a lot more folks start living there, as we hope and expect that to be the case. So working with local partners, the NPO, the state highways, that's one aspect of this planning process that we expect. We need to look at that intersection, that section of road. Is it sufficient? Is it going to be sufficient? If so, this meaning more people are entering and exiting that property every single day. And if it isn't, how can it be improved in a safe and sustainable way? So that's one thought. And that's the type of thinking that we want to express today, that we need your thoughts. If you've got a concern of,
That intersection doesn't need a traffic light going into Wolf Creek.
okay,
Doesn't need traffic light there.
I wasn't suggesting
Yeah, that, okay, that's what I'm saying, it's like, if you're like that, if that's what you're thinking, that's, yeah.
I'm not an expert, so, but I do know that it is already a thing. I get home that way, so. I, as an individual, would raise that as a concern, and I want everybody to know that y'all's concerns are important. They should be raised, because we don't want to get to a point and say, all right, we've thought of everything, only to then realize we didn't think of everything. So yeah, any suggestions, alternatives will be welcome, and you know, that's where, I expect we're probably going to have some focused stakeholder meetings along with the planning firm that's selected to talk about traffic, to talk about individual topics.
Got one question, how's the conservation, how are you guys, are you guys a nonprofit, or how are you guys how are you guys funded, is it better money, private donor, what's the? 501c3 nonprofit, our program is funded by philanthropic. Philanthropic, so you're not government, it's not like government grants that you guys operate, it's philanthropic. No, yeah, okay. No, the conservation fund broader nationally, the conservation work, yeah, federal and all kinds of different. I'm trying to figure out who's. You said he had $110,000, I'm just trying to figure out where that grant money coming from. This would be, yeah, nonprofit foundation.
For once, not your tax dollars.
Oh, I'm sure somewhere back in there's all of our tax dollars.
All of our tax dollars are being taxed with Wolf Creek Park right now. I mean, we really do need to get something done there. And I think we're committed to doing that. It's just, you know, we definitely do need better focus, and I think this is a good first step. But we are feeling pretty impatient about it because it's been a long time, and you know, nobody knows better than the business owners that are already out there and the residents over here. I mean, they've been dealing with septic issues and not having everything they need to, you know, we have a brewery operating off a septic. It's ridiculous.
Not us.
Hmm?
Not us.
Not you guys? I thought you guys had septic. You don't?
Yeah, they're on sewer.
That's a big no-no. You don't have a brewery.
I didn't think so. I was gonna say because, well, I was just thinking the signs in your,
Now, we'll ask you a
the
question.
sign in your bathroom indicate you have septic.
No, that's a big no-no in our
Does the
industry.
sewer stop at your room?
What?
Does the sewer stop right at where you're at, or?
It doesn't run very far in there. I know that.
But currently, we don't have, we have no P and O taxes.
Mhm.
So does that change, or we're gonna be under the umbrella with that, with this new development program? Will that change?
They'd have to annex us in to Oak Hill to get,
No.
No, we're not gonna annex Wolf Creek Park. At least
Okay.
that's not the plan.
Cause it's considered a plateau.
Yeah, we'll team up and fight you on that if there's annexation talk about.
Well, the only problem is, so you'd have to fight Oak Hill because the
Yeah.
municipalities,
You'd have to get your blessing.
can
on it, so
request-
in a way.
well, but the problem is we don't have a choice. Like we don't have a choice. If somebody wants to annex, we have to prove the annex as long as they haven't had more than two in a year, or what's the period?
Yeah,
of-
it's two in a year.
One every 2 years.
But anyway, so
It's,
the pressure to be applied is on the annexing entity.
Free flow was on 16, that was on septic.
Okay, yeah,
So, yeah.
it was.
So, they didn't have it. Is there isn't sewer?
Yeah.
But I know that Oak Hill, in order to accommodate Wolf Creek Park, is gonna have to upgrade its infrastructure in order to be able to accommodate any new development there. That it's not gonna be able to accommodate it as it is, but they have studied it. It's a recent study within the past year, I think. Or at least a minimum of 2 years, but. Anyway, did anybody have any other questions?
But since there will be more, with the last transaction with Blue Water, a lot of it was done behind closed doors, and I feel like personally, I think a lot of people have kind of agree with me. But that there's not a lot of transparency within that transaction. If there is another buyer coming to the table on this, or is the county commission and our DRDA going to be acting in a more transparent way?
Here's the issue, and you're wrong. We were as transparent as we could be, but when you're dealing with contract negotiations, that's one of the things that you can and a lot of times have to do in executive session. And so we had to do that. Now, the problem with Wolf Creek Park, and I don't mind saying it now, but Blue Water development was kind of shoved down our throats. You know, higher level at the state brought that developer to our attention, told our URA, they didn't mind if we picked a different developer. We tried to pick a different developer and we got slapped down, and we have not received a single bit of funding or consideration from the state since for daring to push back on Blue Water. Blue Water wanted like a Flint, one of those little Jellystone campground kind of thing, or water park. There were all kinds of different things going on there. But the reason, Brad, that we had to do those is because of the contract negotiation piece. And I feel like but to his point, Jenna, to the extent we can be transparent, I would like us to be, because I don't want people wondering what happened. I mean, it got shoved down our throat. Blue Water didn't even, I think it got shoved down Blue Water's throat. Blue Water didn't want to develop here, and as soon as it had a reason to bolt, it did. But it held us up for like 2 years while they found it was Brad's lawsuit that caused, that they pointed to and said, "Oh, we're done. We've got an encumbrance on the land now, and
You're
we're
welcome,
just
by
not
the
going to take it." Huh?
You're welcome, by the way. I'm happy.
Well,
to
no,
take the
the result was good, but at the same time, they were almost forced into buying it, but fine, we're gonna get what we want out there, which is good, but I'm just saying.
Turn around and there's $1 million worth of timber on it. They could have turned around, timbered the thing. There's nothing preventing them from turning around timbering out there and sitting on the land. I mean, it was, for them, it was a big deal.
But they weren't who we wanted, and they didn't want us, so now
And
we're starting.
listen, if I can, I'd like to speak to that too from the NRGRDA perspective. So, I just want to remind folks, I mean, I know everyone is here for the same purpose, but I want to remind folks, like, you're in the room with a commission that saved Wolf Creek Park from being a detriment of the community. The commission stepped up when they didn't have to and purchased this property because they saw the handwriting on the wall that the state was going to develop something that didn't fit. I'm sorry, did you say something, John?
No,
Okay, sorry.
disagrees with you strongly and left.
So, sure. So I think we have to remember that, because when the commission didn't have to, they purchased the property to save it from being developed into something the state wanted, which was not something that was a very transparent process. I think, Commissioner Taylor is now the board chair of NRGRDA. So I think her highest priority in this entire transaction is going to be the transparency around this. But I think we have a little ways to go before we even get to the point of negotiating a purchase. We've got to figure out how we can make this an attractive asset for and offer a developer an attractive package to be able to develop. So I want to kind of put that out there to say, like, that's why we're here right now, is that the commission did prioritize this for the right type of development.
But we're not happy with how we handled it at every step either. I mean,
Sure.
we're still all these years later and it hasn't been developed. But we did happen to have the ARPA money, and we did decide that it was better to purchase the property and then have the local control, or at least regional control, and the development authority to try to get it developed in a way that would benefit Fayette County versus the state letting it sit there. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen with it, or we would get another Blue Water or something that we might not have wanted.
To make it marketable, what about the area that's right across the street from us? I mean, don't you want to have that area kind of cleaned up? The gentleman that just left the premise here. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. And it's almost embarrassing to some extent. I was just, the DEP, they drive by that thing every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if there's any,
I'll talk to you some more about that after the meeting.
I mean, there's probably nothing
To see if there's anything we can do. I don't even know if we have any ordinances that might apply, but I'll talk to you after the meeting, see. But as far as, I guess, what Jen is trying to say is, I mean, I do think our hearts are in the right place. I mean, we may still fail, but we're trying to throw everything at it to help us succeed in developing it and still conserve the land around it and and make it into something worth Fayette County's investment and to serve the needs that we have here for housing.
And the state was selling it for half price. We still had to pay over $2 million for it.
Oh, yeah, that was another thing. They would sell it only to Blue Water for a reduction. They would only credit $1 million of the price for only Blue Water, no other developer, and not even the county of Fayette. So it was that, fixed. And I'm sure there were other issues at play because of the state parks being managed by private, folks and things like that, but they got a pretty sweetheart deal and they still, backed out at the first second they could do anything. So I knew from probably, I'd say a year before they backed out that they didn't want to be in there. They were dragging their feet. It was pretty bad.
Was the state just trying to, appease Blue Water from getting pushed out of Haven?
I think that was probably part of it. And I think Blue Water is trying to ingratiate itself to the state in order to maybe get some future development projects with our state parks after that stuff went through. This is just my full speculation. But I think they did have a bigger, because Blue Water did not want it. And I think Blue Water, was hoping to get something from it or was getting something from it. Maybe they were just investing in a future possibility, but they certainly, I think, didn't want it. I think they bid on it as a favor. And as soon as they saw a clear way out, they took it. But in the meantime, they dragged it out for, almost 2 years. I mean, it was bad. So, I'm hopeful here that we're going to come up with something, and we are going to have to bend a lot at the county level, like on the tax issues and stuff like that, just to make it affordable for a developer to come in. But right now we have nothing there. And whatever it takes to get something, once we get it, it may take, 30 years for it to pay for itself, but it's eventually going to create revenue, and it's going to create, more importantly than revenue, housing, which is something we need here desperately, for lots of different folks. So the housing study is really going to help, because that's going to tell us, what exactly we need to focus on putting out there. I mean, I definitely don't want to make houses that are prohibitively expensive, but it's going to have to be a mix, because otherwise the developers aren't going to be, or even going to be harder pressed to afford to develop that area, so it's just kind of a, it's going to be an expensive thing, because I think we're looking at least 20 million in infrastructure. That's just the wastewater and water. That's not even including roads and that sort of thing.
One thing important is keeping the bike trails. There's been a lot of work,
I appreciate that.
a lot of blood, sweat and tears.
Yeah.
A lot of fun for a lot of people. It's important to keep those so that we maintain our natural resources, or our natural history, or trail riding, or mountain climbing, or whatever you want to call it, Fayette County offers. We have a lot of resources, and it's very important that we keep that stuff front and foremost.
One other important thing to keep in mind is we want to work together. We want this all to come together. That's why you're here today. You're here today. You may have an idea. You may have an investor. You may have yourself. You may have something that you want to do. I mean, the possibilities are there. You guys have done some really good things. I've been to some of your businesses and things, and some of the things you guys have done, and y'all have done a good job. Don't limit yourself. It's a good piece of property. There's some good things there. But if you know something, come to us. We're open-minded. We're open-minded. We want to work together. We don't want this to be a versus. We want this to be a together. We're Fayette County. We want to be the best. And how we get there, it's up to you. You're the citizen. You are Fayette County. And he may be a little upset, but he'll be all right. He'll be all right.
He always is.
Yeah, he'll be all right. Well, we thank you. I mean, we thank you for your interest. You're here now because you could be other places. I'm sure you have other things to do. We appreciate it. But I'm sure you have other things to do, but you've taken time out of your day to come and participate, and that's where it all starts. Participation, cooperation, and communication. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we knew we were gambling a little bit, scheduling a public meeting, where we wanted and expected folks to show up, and in the middle of winter, but appreciate everyone's flexibility to join online. I do want to recognize that we've got over a dozen folks tuned in, so I want to sort of extend what we offered already, and any questions or comments to those folks online in case you didn't feel you had the opportunity already.
Do you have the website set up already for people to ask questions?
We don't have the specific webpage, so that's a good point. And for the immediate time, why don't you send any and all questions to me directly? Easy email format that we have me and everybody else, which is my first initial and last name, adavis@nrgrda.org. If you land on our website, nrgrda.org, you'll find my email address. Happy to write it down for anybody. So in the immediate, feel free to reach out to me directly, but we'll have that set up within the next week. And that's also where we're going to be putting a field to drop a question, add links, anything like that. That'll be adaptable throughout the process, and that'll also be what we are able to post any relevant updates of the plan there.
Jenna, any closing remarks?
Not from me at this point. I mean, again, we kind of wanted this to have this conversation to sort of set the tone for next steps for everybody. But as Andy mentioned, please reach out if there are additional questions. We're going to prioritize getting that website set up so that we can keep folks up to date. And we have also committed one thing that did not get mentioned. We have committed that the firm that we select in the RFP, it will be identified that they will need to hold at minimum a virtual public meeting about this. So the public will also hear from the firm that is selected. So I think, again, this was a good opportunity to level set, let everybody knows that we're prioritizing the same things, and we want to do what's best at Wolf Creek. So definitely appreciate the turnout today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited, and thank you all for coming out. I know the weather's not the best throughout the county right now. What'd you say?
It's my kind of weather.
Well, I know you're a skier, but all right. That sounds like we're
Yep, thank you guys for coming in again.
motion adjourned.
Yep. Motion done, second.
Second.